And Henry, if you give me a thumbs up, there we go. So welcome to this webinar for the Pathways to Planning program. Henry, could I have the next slide? Thank you. So today we're going to cover a bit of an introduction. What is Pathways to Planning? You're going to get the chance to meet with one of our current graduates to hear some of our application and interview advice. And then you've submitted your questions in advance. So colleagues at GRB will be fielding those questions to us and will be giving you the insight that you've asked for. If you have any additional questions that come up as you're listening to the presentation today, then we will be popping an email address into the chat, and you can send any further queries to that email address. It makes sure that we don't miss anything, and we've got a lovely team ready to respond to any further queries there. So next slide, please, Henry. So my name is Anna, and I am the program manager for Pathways to Planning. It means I get most bits done. I've got a great team here who are really dedicated towards finding people with a real desire to be a planner in local government. Today I'm really delighted to be joined by Tabby, who's one of our Pathways graduate planners working in a local council and training as a planner. So you'll get to hear from Tabby about what her job is like, and she'll be answering some of your questions later on as well. We've also got the team from GRB. So Henry, I think you can give us a wave. Henry's here as well. He'll be asking some of the questions. Those are the faces probably on your screen. So we can have the next slide. So Pathways to Planning, what is Pathways to Planning? Well, hopefully you've seen a bit of information about the graduate program to come onto today's webinar. So what would you get from taking part in the Pathways to Planning graduate program? Well, first of all, the program offers either a 2 or a 3-year work contract. So we work with a whole range of local councils across all of England, and it's their choice which contract that you would receive. It is tied into which type of funded master's degree is most appropriate for the local area. Further information on exactly what the contract would be and the council's taking part, as I'll show you later on, comes sort of after our assessment process. But the broad offer is it's at least 2 years, possibly 3 years, working in a local council. Councils have to pay a minimum of £24,000, but they do have the freedom to pay you what they would usually pay a graduate planner. Obviously, working across all of England, then there's a great amount of regional difference. Salaries vary based on the cost of living in a local area. So if you're working for a small council in a more rural area, then the salary is probably around £24,000 to £26,000. If you're looking at more of an urban centre, then it's probably more in the £26,000 to £29,000. And if you're looking at working in London, then you're probably looking at between £32,000 and £35,000 by the time you've included a London weighting. So there is a bit of regional variation, but as I say, it'll be really clear to you when you're selecting which councils you'd like to interview at, what the salary is they offer, what the contract length is that they offer as well. So the programme in general, true to every place, includes flexible working offer, which is a really positive aspect of working in local government, and also that you'll receive mentoring and support while you take part in the program. So it's very different from just applying for a normal job in a local council planning team, in that there's loads of extra support and mentoring to see you really succeed as you settle into the job, and as you're balancing work and study. And you'll get to work on a variety of projects within a planning department. So if you don't know very much about planning, that's not a problem at all. I'll come on to some examples in a minute. Next slide, please, Henry. So what is local government? It's totally fine if you've come here today and you don't know the answer to this question. There are, as you can see, over 300 local councils in England. So you've got a central government who work across making decisions for the whole of England, in our case, but they also give a large percentage of money to individual local councils to make decisions about what's best for their local area. So these 300 councils employ around 1 million people. So local councils are often the largest employer in their local area, and there are over 800 different services provided by local authorities. Not every authority will offer all services, but you get an incredible breadth and depth of types of work. And the thing that ties it all together is that all of those services are things that make a real difference to real people living in local communities, decisions that affect them immediately, decisions that affect them for generations to come. So you'll see at the bottom of the screen here some examples of areas that are covered within local government. And there's a lot of cross-pollination between planning, which we'll talk about in a minute. Something like planning and public health go hand in hand. Planning and regeneration of areas goes hand in hand. Planning and climate change, planning and homelessness, planning and social care. And so while all of these different departments have their own function, there's also a lot of cross-working and a vision within the council of doing all they can to make a real difference for people in their local areas. So next slide. So here are some examples of the councils who've taken part in Pathways to Planning. So as you can see, we've worked with councils across the whole of England. Our focus is just on England at the moment, as our grant from central government is limited to England. We are working now to establish the councils who will be hiring graduates as part of our third cohort, but we anticipate this list can only grow. So just to say that we've had quite a broad spectrum so far, and that will continue to grow, we anticipate, as we get closer to September 2025, which is when you'd start work as part of Pathways to Planning. So next slide. So what is planning? As I said, planning is one aspect of local government. So it's a service that councils provide for their local area. And planning isn't just sort of planning as you might plan your uni work or your social life, but planning is a very specific task that relates to, as you might say, everything outside your window. So it's about making places. It's about making decisions about where people live, work and study, how those places are created and connected, how they relate things that are already there to things that are being built. So it is about what we call the built environment, the world around us. But it's not as simple as just sort of sticking a tower block up or putting an extension on somebody's house. Planning has so many different aspects to it, from strategic planning, the vision of what a place will look like, what it should be, and how it's going to develop to meet the needs of its residents 20 or 30 years into the future, alongside with making day-to-day decisions about someone's house or a new development, a new business, the things that make a real tangible difference in a short period of time to people's lives, the places that we call home, and the feeling of home, the feeling of safety. So it's not just building a building, but it's how it's built and what it does and what it achieves and gives to a local area now, but also for years to come. So next slide, please. So local government planning has some really key goals to it. And these are where, if you don't know much about what planning is, most of that is knowledge that you can learn. But what I would say is ask yourself, do you have a real passion to make a social difference, to help local communities, to see really rewarding work come out of what you do at your desk day to day? Are you really interested in having a diverse and changing workload so that you're not just doing one thing every single day, but you're working on lots of different projects? Even if you're just working in the bit of planning that signs off sort of changes to people's houses, you could be looking at sort of 40 different projects at the same time, essentially. So there's never a boring moment working in planning. So if you like something that is really changeable and exciting, then it's a brilliant career area for you. Local councils are really flexible employers, so they have great work-life balance and a really positive culture for you as an individual. And I would say this, having worked in local government for most of my career, but it is a radically different workplace environment and attitude towards you as a person to what you would find in the private sector. So I think if that fits for you, that passion to make a difference, that desire for just treating you as a person within your job is a really brilliant aspect that local government can offer. It's really exciting to work in planning, and especially at the moment, the government has set quite ambitious targets for local councils around house building, but with that comes transport needs, business needs, environmental needs. Climate change is always at the forefront of councils' minds as they're thinking about how their places are going to be ready in the short and the long term for climate change. There's a huge aspect of renewable energy provision, retrofitting, um, focus on public transport, reducing carbon footprints. So, all of those really big issues that we know in the world today, those are the same types of issues you get to look at on both a big scale, but a very practical implementation way, working on some of these transformative projects in an exciting environment of the local government sphere. So, working in a council is the only place that you can make these big strategic decisions for a local area, and there's nothing more exciting than that, I think. And as I said, local government is a really supportive culture. People often talk about the local government family, which can feel a little bit cringe, but it is a place where people are treated with respect, and there's support within the organization. And coming onto a program like Pathways to Planning, you're part of a community of like-minded individuals all sort of at the start of your career, or definitely at the start of your career in planning, um, supporting each other, and being held up by other key individuals within local government and planning, adding support, mentoring, learning opportunities, and a social side as well. Next slide, please. So here are a few examples of the types of work areas within planning. And we will talk a bit more, we'll hear a bit from Tabby about what does this actually look like day to day. So one big area of planning is called development management. So this is managing planning applications. So individual people or big developers have to go through a very set process to have something built or amended. And it's really the responsibility for how your community develops and changes over time, how it enforces principles around environmental stewardship, climate change, even things like design and the impact on individuals, what places look like. So it's a very practical aspect of planning. Then there's spatial planning, also known as planning policy or the creation of local plans. This is the sort of strategic function of a local council. So it's deciding what are the needs and what do we anticipate the needs of our local area to be over the next 20 years, and how are we going to use the land that we've got, the buildings that we've got, and you're beginning to plan where you're going to develop and build, the risks that are coming and the advantages, the things you might want to do, setting the direction of travel for the local authority for the next 20 years. There's enforcement, which is where you get to go around and monitor and deal with unauthorized development. So people building things either incorrectly or building things without ever asking permission before. So it's a really, really practical aspect of planning, and some people absolutely love it. It's if you like telling people off, you know who you are, you would love enforcement. And then there's loads and loads of specialist areas. So you see some of them listed here. There's huge pieces of work around ecology, archaeology, conservation. I think in Tabby's council, there's someone who's specifically a tree officer. So their job is to consider the impact on individual trees as developments are being built, from an individual house to a large scale development. How do you incorporate trees into places? So there's something for everybody in planning. So next slide, please. So let's hear a bit from one of our trainees. So this is just me. I'm just going to ask Tabby a couple of questions about her day to day. So Tabby, could you tell us a little bit about the planning team that you work in and what you're working on at the moment?
Hi, of course. Good morning, everyone. I'm Tabby. I work at Barnet Council in North London, and I'm one of two graduates there on the Pathways scheme. And I'm currently sectioned in development management. So a lot of my work is based around, like Anna was saying, approving applications that have been coming in regarding changes to existing houses. So that is kind of at the higher end of the scale. There are complete new builds that my other colleagues are working on. But at the moment, I'm very much based on kind of permitted development, which is looking at minor changes that are going through, and then also I've had a couple of really interesting ones recently, or applications recently, that then, just like was mentioned, delve more into the complexities of building or working in a built environment. So looking at the impact of a development on trees, and dealing with kind of neighborhood or neighboring comments on applications as well, which I think is one of the most rewarding parts, because you really notice that your impact or a development in your negotiation makes a big difference to the neighbours on either side and the owners of the property.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Tabby. And in terms of other kind of projects going on at Barnet Council, there's the whole range, isn't there? You've got the projects that are almost the bread and butter of every council, changes to people's homes, building of new homes. I wonder if you could talk to us a bit about some of the strategic projects at Barnet Council. I'm thinking of, there's a really exciting development that Tabby and I have visited at Brent Cross. So Tabby, can you give us a little flavour of some of the projects that are going on in the wider planning team that you're part of?
Yes, of course. So we have the Brent Cross regeneration project. So it was an area that was identified in need of regeneration, because it was, falling behind. And I think it was found in the 2000s, and the project is still continuing now. So I think that alone shows the breadth of development and possibilities that are available. And so one of the areas has been regenerated to include a beautiful park, that individuals and new builds are built around, and it really creates a sense of identity that also draws in then economic inflow. And there've also been a couple of new stations opening in that area as well. So you do work with very interesting stakeholders. TfL, for example, is a massive one, National Rail. So I think in general, there is a lot going on. There are a number of other big regeneration sites. So that's with our majors team, and they work on that, and it's slowly wrapping up, but there's still a lot to finish. And yeah, it's really interesting. It's very exciting to go and look around that area.
Thanks, Tabby. And my last question for Tabby now, I know you'll get some more questions later on, is that a big part of the Pathways to Planning program is that you are working full time in a council. From day one, you're working on projects and real work and making a difference. But you're also being released about one day a week to go to university and study on your part-time master's degree. Could you talk to us a bit about what it's been like to balance work and study?
Of course, this has been quite challenging at times. I think because the workload at work is kind of dependent on the residents themselves. But I do get one day off a week, and my council are very, very good at, even during my work periods when, I had a reading week from university, and they said, do use that as time to start working on your assignments, which was very, very generous of them. I'm not sure that's something they have to do, because I'm doing a part-time master's instead of the level 7 apprenticeship. But yeah, I think it has been a bit of a difficulty at times, but it's very rewarding. And also, the council are incredibly invested in what you're learning as well. So I think at some point, maybe not this year, but next year, when I write my dissertation, I'm then going to be asked to present it to the members of my council at some point, or the members of the planning team. So I think that alone, again, shows that they're really invested in us. And my other colleague works or goes to a different university and does the apprenticeship, and both of us have the same provisions and time off. And it is very helpful to have someone else to almost like balance applications with, and yeah, talk to each other about the difficulties at times, but also the great joy of, yeah, having a funded master's alongside getting paid.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks, Tabby. Ken, we will come back to you with questions in a minute. But for now, I think we've got a few more slides. So Henry, can you take us to the next one? So I think hopefully you're hearing from Tabby some of the themes, and as you've been thinking, really this program hopefully sounds good enough that you've come here today, you've given us your time, but is it right for you? And I've been working with graduates in local government for more than a decade, and I think we have a real passion to find the right people for the right job. And it's not just that any job will do, but it's so important and rewarding to find people who, like Tabby said, there will be moments in any role, but looking at pathways to planning that will be challenging. You've got work and study, so you want to make sure that it is the right job for you. So there's a few points on this, and then I've got some points of how can we help you also to make that decision on the next sort of slide or two. So, first and foremost, it's about finding people who are really passionate about making a difference in communities. It's that desire for what you might call public service. It sounds very old fashioned, but I think we all know when your motivation is not just that you want to earn a lot of money at any cost, for example, but that you really want to do something that makes a difference and you want to see tangible things happen. I don't know about some of you, but when I finished university, I said, enough theory. I want to do something where I can see it happen rather than just words on a page. And planning definitely provides that. You do need to have the right to work in the UK to take part in our graduate scheme. It's very difficult for local councils to offer visas. And so, because we work with a whole range of councils who are your employer once you get a job with them, then you do have to have the right to work in the UK for at least 3 years to apply. That's because some of the work contracts will run to 3 years. If you have a visa and it runs for at least 3 years, then that's completely acceptable as well. And we are looking for people with a minimum 2-1 undergraduate degree in any discipline. The reason that we use a 2-1 is because, as Tabby has said, part of the program is that you study on a part-time master's, or you can achieve the part-time master's qualification through something called the Chartered Town Planner Apprenticeship. It gives you the same qualification, but the structure is slightly different, mostly for a local council. Essentially, one way or the other, the entry requirement for those is usually a 2-1 undergraduate degree. And if you've got a 2-1, then we've also got evidence that you've really thrived in that competitive academic environment. So we have the confidence that you'll be able to balance that work and study together. Just to point out that if you've already got a master's degree in planning, then you're not eligible to take part because it's a standard part of the program that we are providing that qualification to you. If you've got a qualification that you're really unsure about, then just drop an email to our support team. I think the email address will appear in the chat if it's not there already, and they can look at any type of qualification and tell you whether it's the right thing or not. So next slide, please. So if all we ask for is the right to work in the UK and a 2-1 undergraduate degree in any subject, you might say, well, how are you going to find out if we're the right person for this job? And how are we going to find out through your application process whether it fits us? So you can see on the screen that the only tool that we use after you've ticked those two boxes of 2-1 and right to work in the UK, then the only thing we assess are the competencies on these screens. On our website, you'll find a full description of each competency, and for each assessment that we use, there are examples on our website of what the competency looks like as a question in that type of assessment. So what we're doing here is trying to be as absolutely transparent as possible about what we're looking for. Hopefully that helps you even just looking at it, tell whether this is something you want to do. And when you're going through the assessment process, you'll be given real life scenarios, which are then also measuring one of these key competencies. So there's hopefully a really brilliant hand-in-hand job prediction for you. Do I want to do this job as you're reading these assessment questions and giving us your answers? And when you answer them, you're telling us whether you're the right fit according to our competencies. So there's loads of information on our website about how we develop these competencies and who is involved. Do check it out. It's there for you to access, and there's loads of support on offer. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we do follow a classic graduate recruitment timeframe. It can feel quite long, but we've done our best to make it as helpful as possible in giving you that job prediction, helping you to make the decision, is this job right for me? And also helping us to make the decision, is this job right for you? As I say, we want people who are a great fit for the job, for your own happiness and professional satisfaction, and that we're giving the opportunity to just the people who are going to take this role and thrive. So when you hit the apply button, as maybe some of you have already, you'll see that we take a very limited amount of information. We do take some information for our equality, diversity, and inclusion monitoring that is done completely anonymously. But what we do at every single one of these assessment stages is before we draw a final pass mark for the assessment, we review all that anonymous EDI data to make sure that setting the pass mark in a certain place is not causing adverse impact or discrimination against any protected characteristic. So the reason we gather that data is to make sure that our assessment process is completely fair, and it's not data that we look at tied to an individual. So the first assessment that you will do alongside your application form is a situational judgment test. Now, you might be familiar with these. They can be a little bit infuriating if people don't tell you how you can practice, because obviously the situations are very relevant to the job. So I would say to prepare for this assessment, please see the sample questions on our website, and remember that each one of them is connected to one of our competencies. So within the test, which you can come in and out of, so it's an untimed assessment. We're really trying to do everything we can to give you an idea of what the job is like in a non-pressured environment. So you can come in and out, you can take as long as you need. The test does have to be completed by our application deadline, which is the 13th of February at 12 noon. You'll get lots of reminders if you've started the process, but please refer to the sample questions on the website and look at those competencies and give yourself enough time to go through it in a really well thought through way. There's no need, it's an untimed assessment. Don't leave it to the last 20 minutes and put yourself under that pressure. You will perform so much better if you've had time to look it through without a really ticking clock in the corner of your mind. Once you've done the SJT, if you are successful, you'll be invited to a video interview. Again, there's some sample questions on our website and a little video to watch with my colleagues who have designed these questions. So then again, we're not trying to catch you out. They are just set up against our competencies, very open questions. You don't need any specific life experience to answer them, but we'd really recommend that you practice, and there's some further guidance that will come out on that. From the video interview stage onwards, if you come from an underrepresented group, we have a coaching provider who will be running workshops and also offering some one-on-one calls. That's a self-selection process that you'd receive information about if you pass the SJT. I'd really encourage you, if that's you, take advantage of that coaching offer. We see people who take the offer really do perform at quite a high level. So again, we want to set you up for success. We're not trying to catch you out. So the video interview will run in late February. And you can complete it at a day and time of your choosing. But again, you have to have it done by the ultimate deadline, and the information on when that is will come through to you. If you pass the video interview stage, then you'll be invited to book onto a half-day assessment center. I know assessment centers can be, again, a bit unnerving, but you'll get lots of information in advance what it looks like, and there will be information on our website. You'll do typically three exercises at the assessment center, a piece of written work, a presentation, and a group discussion. 2 of those will be assessed live by professional assessors, and the other one will be marked afterwards, the piece of written work, again by a professional assessor. Again, the coaching offer will be there for people from underrepresented groups in advance of that stage. And then our last assessment stage is the chance to meet with councils. So candidates who pass the assessment centre fill in an online form where they get to see the profiles of all the councils taking part. The council will tell you what salary they're paying. They'll tell you what university course they have selected. They'll tell you a bit about the local council and their local area, if there's anything extra they need. So a few of our local councils who are located in rural areas will require a driver's license. The majority do not. So you will be able to look through all that information, and then you'll fill in a short form telling us which councils in ranked order you'd really like to interview with. If you have a local connection to one of these local areas, and there'll be space for that to declare on the form. And if you have any extenuating circumstances, maybe you've got a long-term rent agreement, maybe you've got caring responsibilities or specific needs to be in a specific place, then we will prioritize you for an interview where we're able to do so. So you do get the pick of the councils that you're really interested in meeting with, and we do our utmost to give you your top choices on fair balance with everybody else. You'll go to interview with usually about 2 local authorities in a set period of time. Which is sort of the latter half of May 2025. And then at the end of that, you will receive a job offer, hopefully from at least one of the councils you've interviewed with. Will communicate that to you. It's still your choice whether to accept it or not. And once you've accepted it, you begin the normal onboarding process as any employee with the local council, and your application to the correct master's degree will then also begin, and that will run over July and August. You'll start work in September 2025, and your part-time masters will also begin at that stage in time. So next slide, please. So just a quick point, hopefully you've heard this as I've been talking about the program, but we're really, really passionate about equality, diversity and inclusion. We are on all of the projects that we run, recruiting graduates into local councils, because there's nothing more important than local people being represented at every level, particularly for this program. As we're trying to find planners, we're investing time and money into your training and development and support so that you can come and grow on the job and succeed in your career. We want to make sure that people are truly representative of our communities in England. And so please, if you need any reasonable adjustments to make the process equitable for you, please contact our team and we will do everything we can to support you. We offer networks on the program that give you a chance, if you're successful, to connect with people in a whole range of walks of life and topics that they're passionate about. And just to remember that your graduation doesn't have to be recent. So if you're on this call, a lot of the language that we use, as this is a graduate program, does largely appeal to people who are current or recent university graduates, but we don't look at the year that you graduated. So even if it was a long time ago, there's absolutely no discrimination against you. As I said before, we don't look at your work experience or any of those other things. We don't look at what university you studied or what subject you've studied. So it doesn't matter who you are in terms of all of those background elements, but we really want to encourage everybody to come to take a look and see if this is the right program for you. Next slide, please. So I think you can see some of our contact details on the screen here, and I'm going to hand over to Henry to ask some of the questions that you've submitted in advance. But I guess last word from me, I think this program is a fantastic offer. Please do click through at least the first assessment, and it'll give you a really good idea of whether you'd really love to become a local government planner or whether there's maybe another bit of the public sector out there for you. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much for that, Anna. That was a really useful run through and really informative. And as mentioned, so thank you for joining the call today. A lot of you have submitted some really interesting questions to ask towards both Anna and Tabby. So I'll be just going through a few of those and just to give you further clarification on the scheme and the process. So I guess the first question that we'll start with, which can be answered by either yourself, Anna, or Tabby, is just around the progression in the scheme and what that looks like. Yeah, maybe we'll start with Anna, just running through that, and then Tabby, your experience on that.
Yeah, brilliant. So I suppose, is this question mostly around once you've got a place in the scheme, what does life look like for you? Yeah, so you'll start out in what's typically known as a graduate planner role. So this is Tabby now. You'll be working probably in one of those bits of planning that I put up on the screen. So for Tabby, that's development management, making those really practical decisions about changes to people's homes or new developments. If you really love development management and your role in the council is specific to that, or you say to the council, I just love this, then the progression upwards in development management would be from working on, and I think Tabby mentioned this, from working on maybe amendments to individual homes, to then you would begin looking at the construction of new buildings, and then you'd be working up into, they kind of go up in ranked order of size of project and building, isn't it? Then there's the majors team, and that's working on things like the Brent Cross development. So that's looking at mass housing, areas of economic development, transport, big scale transport, like new train stations, tube stations, if you're in London, things like that, trams and metro outside of London. So you would progress up in that kind of category. If you're placed in planning policy, which is another really popular area for our graduates, then you'll probably start holding a very specific role supporting maybe the development of that local plan, that big strategic piece of work. You might be, say, running separate projects on engaging with residents or going out into local areas and mapping community needs. And then again, as you would progress in planning policy, you'd be taking a larger strategic role over the development of some of those big questions around how a local area should be built, and maybe taking more responsibility in terms of the types of stakeholders that you are responsible for engaging with. So you might go from talking to individual homeowners to talking to large businesses or developers, and central government and other stakeholders like that. And then within the other specific areas, sometimes you might start in either one of those areas, but then kind of like Tabby said, you could have a real passion for tree conservation, and you can do some specialist side training to develop as a tree officer or as a heritage planner if you've got a passion for older buildings or the merging of the old and the new in development, and all kinds of things like that. So Tabby, have I done it justice? Anything to add?
Definitely. I think that shows a really good kind of breadth and the ability to move upwards, but also there, like you kind of mentioned at the end, there is that ability to move sideways. And a lot of the councils, of course, I can only speak for mine, but we are suggested and we are told that we do need to go to enforcement at some point, and then we can choose another rotation if we want. So I think I'm going to be sent to enforcement in a couple of months' time, which will be exciting.
Brilliant.
I think
Well,
we're ready for the next one. Thanks, Henry.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering that. It sounds like there's a lot of really good progression opportunities on the scheme. And yeah, the next question that I have is for yourself, Tabby, and it's how have you found going from studying a full-time degree and that transition into studying part-time alongside working?
Well, that's a very good question. So I had another job in between, and I worked abroad for a little bit. So then I found coming back to studying very exciting. And I think it also offers a real difference to the day-to-day like practicality of work when you balance it with sometimes the more theoretical side. I think my degree is a lot more theoretical because it's looking at international planning and not just like local government town planning. So I think that offers a really interesting comparison to full-time. And I think it does make you realize how lucky you were when you were doing your full-time degree, because your entire focus was just academia. Whereas now, it's kind of competing with trying to have a social life as well. And then also, trying to do your best at work and connect with everyone at work, as well as connect with the people that are potentially doing a full-time degree, but you're mixed in with them as a part-timer. So I think you've got to have very strong time management skills and a knowledge of your own ability to get things done. Yeah, but it's very worthwhile, in my opinion.
Brilliant. Some really good tips there. And we also have a question around the situational judgment test. I know you have touched on this already, Anna, but did either of you have any tips on how to maybe best approach this during the application process?
I can maybe say from my side, and then Tabby, as someone who's sat the test, it is a different test. So we do refresh the questions every year. So Tabby can give even an example if you can remember one, Tabby. But I would say in terms of preparing for the assessment, as I say, first of all, have a look at what's on our website. So we've given you, I think the questions on the website were actually some of the questions that were in the pool that were developed for our last test. So it is a very, very real example of the type of question that you'd be given. So to make the questions, we go out, we have an occupational psychologist who interviews graduate planners working in local government and asks them about their job and their day to day and talks to them about our core competencies. So they'll talk about what does it look for you to work well with others in your day-to-day job, and then that graduate planner will give some examples of situations they've faced, so very real life situations they've faced, and then the occupational psychologist maps that onto it, forms it into a sort of depersonalized neutral question and gives you, I think it's 3 options that you choose. What is the best response to this situation and what is the worst response to this situation? And so you're able to it gives us a bit of flex in how we measure and evaluate. So I would say look really closely at those key skills and behaviors, even if the situations are not meant to be really complex in terms of understanding loads about planning, but they are meant to give you a bit of an idea of what the job would be like. So I don't know, Tabby, if that resonates with your experience of doing the assessment last year.
Yes, definitely. It was quite a while ago that I actually did the assessment, but I think what Anna was saying about focusing on the competencies is very important, because obviously everyone comes from a different academic background, and you will have developed those competencies and those skills through your previous studies. So I think thinking about how you would respond to those questions. And I think I remember I had all of the questions or like all of the competencies on sticky notes just to see like around to see if I can remember, what they were and examples of what I've done in my career or, part-time job or like volunteering for societies at university. I think they're all very relevant ideas of how you interact with people and how to work in an environment with other people. So I think that is probably the key tip. And also there are the example questions. And I remember looking at the impact scheme ones as well. So the other scheme that's run by the local government association, they also have their own selection of sample questions. And I went through those as well. I don't know how useful that was, but I think just getting more experience and more practice under your belt is never a bad thing.
Yeah, thanks, Tabby. And that's a great suggestion. So the same wider team run both graduate programs. So the Impact graduate program applications have closed, but there should still be the sample questions on their website. They're developed by the same occupational psychologists interviewing different people. But yeah, if you do the planning ones and you think, oh, I want a little more similar prep about local government, the competencies are slightly different, but there's a lot of similarity there. So it is probably quite a helpful thing. If you're someone who really wants to see multiple examples of something, then that's a great way to do it.
Brilliant. And another really interesting question. So Tabby, I guess coming from your degree background, as it's so open on all degrees for the programme, what maybe led you into going into the scheme and how have you found adapting to the programme?
Well, that's another really good question. I think there really is planning touches everything in your world. So even if you haven't kind of actively or cognizantly engaged with planning, I think when you think about development that's going on around you or flooding from new developments, during the winter at the moment we're having really bad flooding, and I think all of that eventually comes under planning, and it doesn't take very much to unravel that when you think about it a little bit. So it was really just because I'd applied to the Impact program and then didn't end up taking the job. And then I was just kind of looking around and I still wanted to work in local government. And I think that is one of the major benefits as you're working. You can go into like a private consultancy if you want, but working in local government was really one of the draws of this program in particular. And sorry, what was the rest of the question? The first part was kind of the academic background and the transition.
Yeah, I guess it was what led you to applying. Yeah, how have you found applying
Yeah.
your skill set and that transition into the role?
So the second part, I think so I did English literature as my first degree, and we obviously the major part of that is the ability to write and concisely draw different arguments together. And I think practically when it comes to writing decision notices and applications, the ability to have a reasoned judgment all the way through and to look at an application and say, is this a reasonable use of space, for example, and then being able to argue one way or another in a very, it does require slightly different skills and writing skills, but I think it's something that I definitely benefited from, having had an undergraduate degree that focuses on writing. But also that isn't one of the only things we have to do. I've had to do a lot of learning on looking at plans and actually trying to understand how they work in a 3D perspective instead of just a 2D on a piece of paper. So that has been, yeah, it's been very helpful to have an aspect of my background, but I'm always learning.
Brilliant, thank you, Tabby. And I guess we have room for one final question, which can be towards both yourself and Anna. And if I appreciate you've given quite a thorough run through of the application process, but do you have any final key tips for someone who is applying and going through that process that you'd wish you'd maybe for yourself, Tabby, known before applying, and Anna, just in general, that could maybe help someone going through it?
Yeah, definitely. So, from a general perspective, I would say the most important things when you're doing a graduate recruitment process like this, so for us, but for anything else that you're considering as well, it really does come down to the most dull and basic points, which are please give yourself time. So, I know we're all driven by a last minute deadline, and you're balancing probably some big academic priorities. Maybe you're in work, maybe you're doing both. Maybe you've got caring responsibilities. I don't diminish how busy your life is right now, but please, we find that when people do the assessments at the absolute last minute, it adds such a burden of stress on them that is not necessary, particularly for the first assessment, which is untimed. Give yourself time to do it. Even if you dip in and out a little bit, please don't put yourself under a time pressure that doesn't exist. So I would say that for all the assessments, go into the video interview with enough time that if you have a tech issue, it's not going to make you super, super stressed. If you're finding something difficult to engage with, it gives you time to chat to our team as well. If you're coming to an assessment center, again, give yourself time to do the tech check before you come in. It is just the basics, because the impact it can have on you in terms of your stress can really impact how well you perform. If you can get a good night's sleep, nourish yourself with some food. I would say we've tried very carefully to plan our assessments for anyone observing Ramadan so that you're not having to complete the assessments in that kind of time frame as well. But generally, if 2 o'clock in the morning is a great time for you, then do feel free. But if it's not, we've had someone on the other graduate scheme who'd made a mistake at 2 o'clock in the morning, that really impacted their applications. So it is really the basics. I think for me, read the questions on the website, reflect on them, have a little practice if you can. The more thought you put into it, the calmer you'll feel. But if you do need any reasonable adjustments, and this is my second big takeaway point, please, please, please contact us in advance. It never counts against you. All we want to do is make the playing field as equal as possible for everyone who applies to see you at your best. So if there are things that we can do to make the process more accessible for you, then we're really passionate about making that happen. So Tabby, I know the process maybe feels a little while ago, but anything personal to add to that for recommendations?
Yeah, I think Anna covered a lot of it, so thank you. But I guess one of my key tips, just generally, is always having a glass of water. Like if you're feeling stressed, I think that really helps just to have it next to you. And then if you're panicked or something, you can just take a breath and have a glass of water. And the other one, more specifically to this scheme, is look at, if you're kind of further down the line of the applications, look at the different councils' websites and any information that is available there. And I guess it's, again, quite generic, because that's what you do. You do a bit of a background check on any company when you apply. But I think it is very important to do that broad check and see if you're interested in what's being offered in the different councils, because they are so incredibly varied, and you do want to eventually end up somewhere, hopefully, where you will thrive and it's something or some place that you're really interested in working in the environment. Yeah, I think that's probably my key takeaway.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Elise, did you have something to add?
Yeah, hi, just really quickly. Hi, I'm Elise and I run the marketing side on Purpose Planning. I just wanted to add to that. Most local councils, if you Google them plus local plan, they will have their local plans available. So that's a really good resource if you're, like Toby said, further down the line and trying to do council research, or just trying to, clear yourself up a little bit about what planning is about. If you just look up, say, your local council local plan, they're all online. That, like, some of them are quite interactive. They'll have lots of information about what the priorities of that council are and what's important to them and what they're planning to do over the next 10, 20, 30 years. So I'd say they're a great thing to look at, especially if doing an interview at council. It means that you've just got that extra bit of information about what's important to them. So yeah, it's just my little tip.
I think that's such a fantastic tip, Elise. So when candidates who pass the assessment centre, the local plan should be linked to in their document. But like Elise says, if you're you look at our website and you think, I'm still not quite sure what planning is, or you want just an example that you can identify with, then going on to your council website plus local plan will give you sort of images of your local area that are familiar to you, and it'll make the planning side of it hopefully make a bit more sense. So such a great idea from Elise. I think that might bring us to time, Henry.
Yeah, thank you so much for all your answers to the questions, and thank you to everyone joining the event today. As you can see on our screen, if you did have any further questions or there was just a bit more information that you were looking to get, please do email the contact information that is currently on the screen. But yeah, thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much to Anna, to Elise and Tabby for really providing such a great insight into the programme. I wish everyone the best of luck in the application process, and have a lovely rest of your afternoon.
Thanks so much. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.